You know, sometimes the people you expect to stand beside you, to be your shield and comfort, end up being the very ones who try to cut deepest into your soul. And when I think back to that day, I still remember the way my own blood dismissed me with words that no stranger could have ever dared to say. You don't even have a family, they told me, like those words were supposed to shatter me. Like they wanted me to believe that being born into their bloodline didn't automatically mean belonging. And for a moment, I almost let myself believe them, because for so many years I had been treated like an outsider, like my presence was a burden and my achievements were a threat. That day started like any ordinary morning, the kind of day where you don't expect the foundation of your world to crack open and reveal how truly ugly the people closest to you can be. I had just finished cleaning up my kitchen, humming to myself while pouring coffee into my favorite chipped mug, when I got the call that would set everything into motion. It wasn't just a call, it was the beginning of betrayal. A betrayal that I never would have seen coming, even though, deep down, I should have known. The voice on the other end was my cousin, her tone oddly polite, almost too friendly, like someone who had rehearsed a kindness they didn't really feel. She asked me how I was doing, and before I could even answer fully, she slipped in the line about how everyone in the family had been talking about me, how they wondered if I was lonely in that big house all by myself, how it must feel strange to be without a family. The words sliced through me, because I had fought for that house. I had worked years and years, saving every penny, sacrificing nights of sleep and weekends of joy just so I could finally own something that was mine, a space where I could finally breathe without judgment. And here she was, speaking like my hard work was nothing, like my independence was evidence of emptiness, like my worth was tied to whether they approved of me. I laughed it off in that moment, told her I was fine, that I liked my solitude, but my chest felt heavy, because behind her polite voice I could hear the echo of the rest of them, the whispers of cousins, aunts, uncles, siblings, all dismissing me as if I was some kind of orphan, even though they were very much alive, very much aware, and very much cruel. It's one thing to be ignored, another to be insulted. But it's something far more sinister when you realize the words are not just words, they're part of a plan, because little did I know, while they were calling me alone, they were already making moves to invade the very home they claimed I didn't deserve. And the first crack in their scheme showed up that very afternoon, when I found out that a few of them had been seen snooping around my neighborhood, asking my neighbors casual questions about me, as if they were gathering information, as if my life was a puzzle they needed to solve. At first, I thought it was paranoia, but then the neighbor across the street told me, with a hesitant smile, that my family had asked whether I planned to rent out any rooms, whether I was planning to sell, or whether I was struggling to keep up with bills. My heart sank, because it wasn't curiosity, it was calculation, and that was only the beginning of the storm that was about to consume me, a storm where my own blood would try to paint me as weak, lonely, and unworthy, only to justify sneaking behind my back and attempting to claim the very house I had built my life around. The strangest part about betrayal is that it doesn't come like a thunderclap, it seeps in slowly, almost quietly, so that by the time you realize what's happening, you're already knee-deep in the damage. After that first neighbor told me about my relatives snooping around, I tried to convince myself it was just idle gossip, that maybe they were curious in the way relatives sometimes are, but the gnawing in my stomach told me otherwise. I couldn't shake the image of them circling my life like vultures, pretending to care while secretly plotting their way into what I had earned. For years, I had been the quiet one in the family, the one who didn't complain when they dismissed my achievements, the one who didn't retaliate when they mocked me for not marrying early, for not having kids, for choosing solitude over the noisy chaos of family gatherings. They thought my silence was weakness, but in reality, my silence had been my armor, had been protecting myself from their poison. But this time, their poison was seeping into the very walls of my house, and I could feel it. A week later, the first sign of their true intentions came wrapped in what looked like generosity. My brother, who hadn't spoken to me in months except to ask for money, suddenly showed up on my doorstep with groceries in his arms and a forced smile on his face. I knew immediately something was wrong, because he never did anything without a reason. He walked in like he owned the place, commenting on how spacious the living room looked, how quiet the neighborhood seemed, how lucky I was to have landed such a beautiful house. I forced a smile, made small talk, but inside, every word of his felt like a probe, a test. as if he was surveying his new territory rather than visiting a sibling. And then, casually, as he unpacked the groceries, he said, "It must get lonely here at night. You know, big house, no kids, no one to share it with." The words struck me like a knife, because they echoed exactly what my cousin had said earlier, like they were rehearsing the same script, playing the same manipulation. I brushed it off, changed the subject, but that night I barely slept, because the puzzle pieces were fitting together. They were softening me up, planting the idea that I didn't need all this space, that maybe it would be better if family filled it, that maybe my independence was selfish rather than something to be proud of. And soon enough, the visits became frequent, cousins dropping by with desserts, aunts calling to check on me, siblings suddenly remembering my number. On the surface, it looked like care, but the undercurrent was rotten with entitlement. My suspicions turned into certainty the day I overheard two of them in my backyard, whispering about which room would be theirs if they moved in. I froze in the kitchen, my heart pounding, listening as one of them laughed about how I wouldn't fight back because she's too nice, too quiet, too desperate to prove she's not really alone. That was the moment the switch flipped inside me, when I realized I wasn't just dealing with selfishness, I was dealing with an invasion, with a coordinated effort to push me out of the life I had fought tooth and nail to build. And yet, when I confronted them about it, when I demanded to know why they were sneaking behind my back, they turned the tables on me. They sneered and said, "You don't even have a family. What are you protecting this house for? It's wasted on you." Their voices dripped with mockery, and for the first time in my life, I looked at the people who shared my blood and saw strangers who wanted to strip me of my dignity, of my sanctuary, of the only thing that felt like home. And in that moment, my silence, my patience, my attempts to keep the peace, all of it shattered. I knew I couldn't let them win, because if I gave them even 1 inch, they would swallow me whole. What haunted me the most wasn't just their words, but the way they said them so casually, as if stripping me of my humanity was nothing more than family banter. As if telling me I didn't have a family was simply a fact rather than a cruel attempt to push me into submission. That night, after they left my backyard, I sat alone in my living room staring at the walls that I had painted with my own hands, walls that carried the echoes of my laughter, my tears, my long nights of work and perseverance. Every tile, every creak of the floorboard reminded me of the battles I had fought to be here. And yet now those same walls felt invaded by the shadow of people who were supposed to protect me. I thought back to childhood, to all the times they excluded me from their games, their inside jokes, their family plans, always labeling me as different, as though my quiet nature was a defect. And maybe that was why it hurt so much, because a part of me had always wanted their acceptance, had always wished they would see me not as an outsider but as someone worth standing beside. But now, I realized that longing for their validation had been my greatest mistake. They weren't capable of seeing me as equal, because in their eyes, my independence was proof that I didn't need them, and people like that don't know how to respect strengths, they only know how to break it. Days turned into weeks, and their visits became more brazen. My sister, who rarely even remembered my birthday, suddenly showed up with her kids, letting them run wild through my home as if it were a playground. She laughed as they tore through my things, making excuses about how children needed space, how they just loved my house so much. But when I asked her to keep an eye on them, her smile faded and she muttered under her breath, "You wouldn't understand, you don't have kids, you don't even have a family." It was like a dagger disguised as an offhand comment, but I swallowed my rage because I knew if I exploded then, they would twist it to their advantage. That was the game they wanted me to react, to lash out, so they could call me unstable, selfish, or ungrateful. But I refused to give them that satisfaction. Instead, I watched, listened, and collected every word, every action, every sign of their manipulation. One evening, when they thought I wasn't home, I caught two of my cousins actually inside my house, whispering as they measured spaces with their arms, talking about where they would put their furniture. My blood ran cold, and when I confronted them, they laughed nervously and said they were just joking. But the look in their eyes told me everything. I wasn't paranoid. They were planning to move in, with or without my permission. My sanctuary had become a battlefield, and I realized I could no longer rely on politeness or patience. The line had to be drawn, and it had to be drawn firmly. But even as I gathered the courage to stand my ground, The words they had thrown at me kept ringing in my ears, reminding me of the loneliness they wanted me to feel. "You don't even have a family." Over and over, it echoed, and for a brief moment, I questioned myself. Was I truly alone? Did the absence of children or a partner mean that I was unworthy of defending what was mine? But then I remembered all the nights I had fought through exhaustion to make my dreams real. All the times I had lifted myself up when no one else reached out a hand. That was family, to the family I built with myself, the love I poured into my own survival. And, in that realization, I found a spark of defiance. If they wanted a war, then a war they would get, but it would not be on their terms. It would be on mine. The day I decided to finally confront them fully was the day I stopped feeling like a victim and started recognizing my own power. Because there comes a moment when you realize that silence and patience are no longer signs of strength, they become weapons your enemies use against you. I woke up that morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks, a fire in my chest that burned away the doubt they had planted. My family had mistaken my solitude for weakness, my quiet for emptiness, and my kindness for surrender. But they had forgotten something critical. I had survived storms long before they ever thought of claiming my house. And I wasn't about to let them bulldoze me out of the one thing I had worked my entire life for. So when my brother and sister showed up unannounced, as they often did, this time with luggage in tow as if daring me to stop them, I didn't greet them with forced smiles or nervous laughter. I stood firm in the doorway, blocking their path, and asked a question so direct it sliced through the air like a blade. "Are you planning to move into my home behind my back?" Their eyes darted to each other, and in that silence I heard more truth than any words could carry. Finally, my brother smirked, shrugged, and said, "Well, why not? You don't even have a family. This house is too big for you alone. It's selfish to keep it all to yourself when we could actually use it." And in that moment, I saw them not as siblings, not as blood, but as intruders, entitled strangers, cloaked in the excuse of family. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't waver. I told them they had no right, that my sacrifices weren't theirs to exploit, that I had bled and broken myself to build this life, and if they thought I was going to roll over and hand it to them, they were out of their minds. They tried to laugh it off, to guilt me with words like, "We're your family and you owe us," but each syllable only fueled my fury, because family doesn't belittle you, doesn't conspire behind your back, doesn't attempt to erase your worth. I could see the shock on their faces when I didn't bend, when I didn't let their insults twist into chains around my neck like they used to. Instead, I reminded them of every time they had ignored me when I needed help, of every birthday forgotten, of every time they had mocked me for walking my own path. "You call yourselves my family," I said, my voice cracking but strong. "But where were you when I was building this life alone? Where were you when I needed support? You only show up now, when there's something to take." My sister's face hardened, and she spat back, "You're pathetic. You think having a house makes you something? You'll die here alone, and this place will mean nothing." But the words didn't land the way she intended, because instead of piercing me, they bounced off the armor I had finally forged. I looked her straight in the eye and told her, "Maybe I'll be alone, but at least I'll be free. At least this house will be mine, built by my hands, not stolen through manipulation." They didn't like that answer. And for the first time, I saw fear in their eyes, not fear of me, but fear of losing the control they thought they had. That was the moment I knew I had turned the tide, that no matter how much they schemed or mocked, they couldn't erase the truth. I wasn't powerless, and I wasn't going to surrender. And when I shut the door in their faces that day, it wasn't just a door closing on their bodies, it was a door slamming shut on years of letting them define my worth. It was the birth of something new inside me, a strength I didn't even know I had. The kind of strength that grows only after you've been pushed to the edge of losing everything. In the weeks after I shut that door, I learned something about family that no one had ever told me. Sometimes, family is not the people who share your blood, but the people who respect your boundaries, who cheer for your success instead of resenting it, who walk beside you without trying to take what's yours. My so-called relatives didn't stop immediately. They tried again, this time in whispers, through phone calls and messages filled with guilt trips, painting me as selfish for not helping them, claiming I was heartless for leaving them to struggle while I lived in luxury all alone. They spun stories to neighbors, even tried to convince distant relatives that I was unstable, that I had lost touch with reality. But by then, their words had lost their sting, Because once you see someone's true face, once you recognize the malice behind the mask, you can never be fooled again. I stopped answering their calls, stopped entertaining their sudden acts of fake kindness. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about it. I took long walks through my neighborhood, talked to the neighbors who actually looked out for me, spent time nurturing the life I had built instead of wasting my energy proving my worth to people who never saw it. And in those quiet moments, in the stillness of my home, I realized that the family they mocked me for not having was not avoided, was a choice. I chose peace over chaos, respect over blood ties, freedom over chains of manipulation. And maybe that scared them, because people like that can't stand when someone they thought was weak refuses to bow down anymore. The house they tried to invade became more than just walls and a roof. It became a symbol of every battle I had fought and won, a testament to the fact that I could stand on my own, that I was enough. Did it hurt to know that my own blood would rather see me stripped of everything than celebrate my success? Of course, betrayal from strangers cuts, but betrayal from family bleeds differently, leaves scars you can't see but always feel. Yet those scars became my armor. Reminders that survival isn't always about who holds your hand, but about who tries to pull it away. I look back now and realize that they were wrong about me. I do have a family, it just doesn't look like theirs. My family is the circle of people who respect my no, who don't see my solitude as emptiness but as strength, who don't try to move into my life uninvited. My family is me, the woman who refused to be erased, who stood in the doorway and said no when saying yes would have been easier but would have cost her everything. And so, if you've ever been told you're alone, if you've ever been made to feel like your worth depends on people who only show up to take, remember this: you are not defined by those who fail to see your value. You are defined by the way you protect it, the way you build and defend your own peace. When I hear their voices in my head now, mocking, saying, "You don't even have a family," I don't feel the old sting. I smile, because they were right in one way. I don't have the kind of family they meant. I have something better. I have freedom, dignity, and a life I can call my own. And when they tried to move into my house behind my back, they thought they would find a lonely woman desperate for connection. Instead, they found a wall they couldn't break through, a strength they didn't expect, and a truth they couldn't rewrite. And that truth is simple: I am enough. My life is mine. And no one, not even blood, has the right to take that away.